The clock on the wall showed 10:47 p.m. when Dr. Michael Chen finally looked up from his paperwork. Rain was beating hard against the windows of his small clinic, making a sound like tiny stones hitting glass. He rubbed his tired eyes and stretched his back. It had been another long day of seeing patients, most of whom could barely afford to pay for their medicine, let alone his services. Michael had opened this clinic 3 years ago, in the heart of the city's immigrant neighborhood. His parents thought he was crazy. "Why don't you work at the big hospital downtown?" his mother would ask. "You could make 3 times as much money." But Michael knew exactly why he was here. He had grown up poor himself, watching his own mother struggle to pay for doctor visits when he was sick. He remembered the shame in her eyes when she had to ask for payment plans, the way some doctors looked at them like they didn't belong, as he packed his medical bag and turned off the lights. In the examination rooms, Michael thought about going home to his small apartment. Maybe he'd heat up some leftover soup and watch the news before bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same routine, seeing patients, filling out forms, trying to keep the clinic running on almost no money. That's when he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. Bung, bung, bung. Someone was pounding on the front door of the clinic with desperate force, the kind of pounding that could only mean one thing: emergency. Michael dropped his bag and ran to the door, his heart already racing. Through the glass, he could see a woman standing in the pouring rain. She was soaked to the bone, her dark hair stuck to her face. But what made Michael's hands shake as he unlocked the door was what he saw in her arms. A small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, hung limply against his mother's chest. Even through the rain and darkness, Michael could see the child's face was pale and his breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. "Please," the woman gasped as soon as the door opened. "Please help my son. He's very sick." Maria Santos had been running through the rain for 20 minutes, carrying her 8-year-old son Carlos from hospital to hospital. At the first hospital, they took one look at her worn clothes and broken English and told her she needed insurance cards. At the second hospital, they said the same thing, but this time they also asked for identification papers that Maria didn't have. She was what people called undocumented. She had come to this country 5 years ago with nothing but hope and the clothes on her back, looking for a better life for her son. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and working in a factory during the day. Every penny she made went toward rent, food, and keeping Carlos in school. There was never enough left over for health insurance, and going to the doctor was a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, as she looked down at her son's burning face, none of that mattered. Carlos had been sick for 3 days with what she thought was just a cold, but tonight, his fever had shot up so high that he began talking to people who weren't there. His breathing became labored, and he could barely keep his eyes open. "Bring him in, quickly," Michael said, stepping aside to let them into the clinic. Maria stumbled inside, water dripping from her clothes onto the clean floor. "I'm sorry about the water," she whispered, but Michael was already leading her toward the examination room. "Don't worry about that," he said, turning on the lights and clearing space on the examination table. "Put him here." As Maria gently laid Carlos on the table, Michael could see just how sick the boy really was. His skin was burning hot but somehow looked pale and grayish. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "How long has he been like this?" Michael asked, already reaching for his stethoscope. 3 days. He has fever," Maria said, her voice thick with worry and her English broken by panic. "But tonight, very bad. He talks to his grandmother, but she is dead 2 years. He says she is calling him." Michael's trained ear immediately picked up the crackling sound in Carlos's lungs when he listened with his stethoscope. His heart rate was too fast, his temperature was dangerously high, and his oxygen levels were low. This wasn't just a cold or flu. This was pneumonia, and it was severe. "This is serious," Michael said gently. He has an infection in his lungs, and he's dehydrated. He needs antibiotics for fluids and oxygen support. He needs treatment right away." Maria's face went white. She had heard those words before, at the other hospitals. Treatment meant money. Lots of money. Money she didn't have. "How much?" she whispered. Michael looked at the sick child on his table, then at the mother whose whole world was falling apart. He knew what this treatment would cost. The antibiotics alone would be expensive, not to mention the equipment, the oxygen, and the hours of monitoring Carlos would need. For a clinic that was already struggling to pay its bills, this could be the final blow. The treatment he needs, Michael said slowly, could cost several $1,000s. Maria's legs nearly gave out. Several $1,000s might as well have been $1 million. She worked for minimum wage, and after rent and food, she had maybe $50 left each month. Even if she stopped eating, stopped paying for everything else, it would take her years to save that kind of money. "I don't have ... double quotes," she started to say, then stopped. She looked at her son lying so still on the table, his small chest rising and falling with each difficult breath. She thought about how he laughed when she told him stories at bedtime. How proud he was when he brought home good grades from school. How he always saved half his candy to share with her. She couldn't lose him. She wouldn't lose him. Maria looked up at Dr. Chen, and in that moment, she made a decision that came from the deepest, most desperate part of her heart. "Doctor," she said, her voice shaking, "I have no money, but I have myself." She took a deep breath, her cheeks burning with shame. "You can have me tonight. You can have whatever you want from me. Just please, save my son." The words hung in the air between them like a weight. Michael felt his heart break as he realized what this mother was offering. She was willing to give up her dignity, her body, everything she had, for her child's life. In that moment, looking at Maria's desperate face and her dying son, Dr. Michael Chen had a choice to make. A choice that would change both their lives forever. Time seemed to stop in that small examination room. The only sounds were the rain hitting the windows and Carlos's labored breathing. Dr. Michael Chen stood frozen, staring at Maria as her words echoed in his mind. She had just offered him the most desperate bargain a mother could make, her own body in exchange for her child's life. Michael had been a doctor for 8 years, but nothing in medical school had prepared him for this moment. He looked at Maria's face, seeing the shame burning in her cheeks mixed with fierce determination. This wasn't about money or greed. This was about a mother who would literally give everything she had to save her son. For a few seconds, Michael's mind raced. He thought about his own struggles. His clinic was barely surviving financially. He had loans to pay back from medical school, rent for the clinic space, and bills that kept piling up. His parents called him every week, asking when he would give up this charity work and join a real practice that made real money. Just last month, he had to choose between buying new medical equipment and paying the electric bill. But then he looked down at Carlos lying on the examination table. The boy's face was flushed with fever, his small body fighting a battle it might not win without help. Michael saw his own childhood in that pale face, remembered being 8 years old and sick with pneumonia himself, remembered his mother's terror as she begged doctors to help her son. "Ma'am," Michael said quietly, his voice gentle but firm, "please sit down." Maria remained standing, her whole body trembling. "Doctor, I know what I am asking is not right, but my son..." "Sit down," Michael repeated, pulling out a chair for her. "We need to help Carlos first." Without waiting for her response, Michael moved quickly to a cabinet and began pulling out medical supplies for bags, tubing, antibiotics, oxygen equipment. Maria watched in confusion as he worked, preparing everything her son would need. "Doctor, I told you I cannot pay," she said, her voice breaking. Michael didn't look up from what he was doing. "Did I ask you for money?" he said simply. He rolled the four-pole next to the examination table and gently took Carlos's small arm. The boy was barely conscious, his eyes fluttering open and closed. "Carlos," Michael said softly, "I'm going to help you feel better, okay? This might pinch a little." As Michael inserted the needle into Carlos's arm, Maria stood up abruptly. "Doctor, you don't understand. I have nothing to give you except—" "Stop," Michael said, finally looking at her directly. His eyes were kind but serious. "I understand exactly what you offered me, and I'm telling you that some things in this world are not for sale. A child's life is one of them." Maria stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "But the money will figure itself out," Michael said, connecting the bag and adjusting the flow. Almost immediately, the fluid began entering Carlos's system, starting to replace what his body had lost to the fever and infection. Michael continued working, checking Carlos's temperature, listening to his lungs again, and setting up the oxygen mask. With each passing minute, his movements became more confident, more focused. This was what he had trained for, what he believed in. Not the business side of medicine, but the actual healing. "Why?" Maria whispered, sinking into the chair. "Why are you helping us?" Michael was quiet for a moment as he adjusted Carlos's oxygen mask. "Do you want to know why I opened this clinic?" he asked. Maria nodded, still not understanding what was happening. "When I was 7 years old, I got very sick," Michael began, checking Carlos's pulse while he talked. "My mother took me to 3 different hospitals. At each one, they asked for insurance cards, for money up front, for payment guarantees. My mother cried in the waiting room of the 3rd hospital because she thought I was going to die, and she couldn't get anyone to help me." He pulled up a second chair and sat down next to Maria, but kept his eyes on Carlos, monitoring his breathing. "Finally, an old doctor at the county hospital saw me. He didn't ask about money first. He just started treating me. When my mother tried to talk about payment, he told her the same thing I'm telling you. Some things aren't for sale." Maria wiped tears from her eyes. "What happened to you?" "I got better," Michael said with a small smile, "and I promised myself that when I became a doctor, I would never let a child suffer because their parents couldn't pay." For the next hour, Michael worked steadily to stabilize Carlos. He gave him strong antibiotics through the IV monitored his oxygen levels, and slowly brought his fever down with cooling blankets and medication. Maria sat beside her son's bed, holding his hand and watching Dr. Chen work. As the night wore on, something beautiful began to happen. Carlos's breathing started to get easier. His fever began to break. The gray color in his skin slowly gave way to a healthier pink, and for the first time in 3 days, he opened his eyes and really saw his mother. "Mama," Carlos whispered weakly. Maria burst into tears, leaning over to kiss his forehead. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." Michael checked Carlos's temperature again, and smiled. "His fever is down to 101. That's much better. The antibiotics are working. He's going to be okay?" Maria asked, afraid to hope. "He's going to be okay," Michael confirmed. "But he needs to stay here tonight so I can watch him. The 4 needs to keep running, and I want to make sure his breathing continues to improve." Maria nodded quickly. "Yes, of course. Whatever he needs." As Carlos drifted back to sleep, this time peacefully, instead of restlessly, Maria looked at Dr. Chen with wonder. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Michael was writing notes in Carlos's medical chart. "We're not strangers," he said simply. "We're neighbors. We live in the same community. Your son plays in the same parks as other children I treat. When one child is sick and doesn't get help, it affects everyone." He looked up from the chart. "Besides, your son reminds me of myself at that age. Smart, brave, fighting hard to get better." Maria shook her head slowly. "In my country, people always want something in return. Always. Nothing is free." This isn't free, Michael said, surprising her. Maria's face showed fear again. What do you mean? I mean that helping people costs something, Michael explained. It costs time, energy, money, sleep, but some costs are worth paying. Some things we do not, because we expect something back, but because they're right. He stood up and checked Carlos's for one more time. Your son is going to need follow-up care, medicine to take home, maybe a few more visits to make sure the infection is completely gone. I'm not asking you to pay for any of that. Then what are you asking? Maria whispered. Michael smiled, and for the first time that night, Maria saw hope instead of worry in his eyes. I'm asking you to let me be your family's doctor, he said. I'm asking you to trust me to take care of Carlos. And maybe, if you know other families who need help, you can tell them that there's a doctor here who cares more about healing than money. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the clinic windows, Maria realized that her desperate offer had been refused, but something much more valuable had been given in return. Not just her son's life, but hope for a future she had never dared to imagine. 2 weeks had passed since that rainy night when Carlos almost died. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the sun came up, Maria quietly unlocked the door to Dr. Chen's clinic with the key he had given her. She would spend the next 2 hours cleaning every surface, organizing medical supplies, and making sure everything was perfect before the first patients arrived. Maria had insisted on doing something to help, even though Dr. Chen kept telling her it wasn't necessary. You saved my son's life, she had told him. I must do something. So they worked out an arrangement. She would clean the clinic in the early mornings, and in return, Dr. Chen would continue treating Carlos until he was completely well. But what started as a simple trade had become something more complicated. As Maria cleaned, she began to see things that worried her. The clinic was falling apart in small ways. The waiting room chairs were old, and some had broken legs that Dr. Chen had fixed with tape. The ceiling had water stains from a leak that he couldn't afford to repair properly. The medical equipment was outdated, and Maria often saw Dr. Chen frowning at bills that came in the mail. One morning, while Maria was mopping the floor in the examination room, she overheard Dr. Chen on the phone with someone who sounded angry. I understand the payment is late, Dr. Chen was saying, his voice tired. I can send you half this week, and half next week. Please don't shut off the electricity. I have patients who need help. After he hung up, Maria saw him sit at his desk, and put his head in his hands. For a moment, the doctor who had seemed so strong and confident looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. That evening, when Maria came to pick up Carlos after his checkup, she found Dr. Chen still at the clinic at 9 p.m., filling out paperwork by the light of a single lamp to save on electricity. Doctor, she said softly, you should go home. You work too much. Doctor. Chen looked up and smiled, but Maria could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Just finishing up some insurance forms, he said. These companies make it very difficult to get paid for treating patients. Carlos was playing with some toys in the corner, completely healthy now, his cheeks pink, and his energy back to normal. But Maria noticed that the toy box was nearly empty, and the few toys that were there were old and worn. Doctor, can I ask you something? Maria said, sitting down across from his desk. Of course. Why don't you work at a big hospital? You could make more money, have better equipment, not worry about electricity bills. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, then he gestured toward Carlos. You see your son there, happy, healthy, playing. Maria nodded. At a big hospital, he would have been turned away that night, just like he was at the other places. They would have seen that you couldn't pay, and they would have sent you somewhere else, maybe to a county hospital an hour away. Maybe Carlos wouldn't have made it that long. He leaned back in his chair. I opened this clinic because this neighborhood needed a doctor who would treat people first and worry about money second. But I'm learning that good intentions don't pay for medicine or keep the lights on. Maria felt her heart break a little. Dr. Chen had saved her son's life and asked for nothing in return. But he was struggling because of his kindness. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Dr. Chen, working alone in his clinic, trying to help people while the bills piled up around him. She thought about all the other families in their neighborhood who probably needed help but were afraid to ask because they couldn't pay. The next morning, Maria arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. She had an idea, but she wasn't sure if Dr. Chen would like it. "Doctor," she said when he arrived at 7 a.m., looking surprised to see her there so early. "I want to ask you something. What if other people helped too?" "What do you mean?" he asked, unlocking his office. "I mean, what if other families like mine helped clean, organize, translate? What if we worked together?" Dr. Chen paused in the doorway. "Maria, I can't ask people to work for free." "You didn't ask me," Maria pointed out. "I wanted to help. Maybe others want to help too." Over the next few days, Maria began talking to other mothers in the neighborhood. She spoke to women at the grocery store, at the bus stop, at Carlos's school. She told them about Dr. Chen and what he had done for her family. The response surprised even her Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband worked in construction, said he could fix the leak in the ceiling for free. Anna, who worked as a translator at the courthouse, offered to help patients who didn't speak English. Patricia, who was studying to be a nurse, said she could volunteer a few hours a week to help with simple procedures. But Dr. Chen was hesitant when Maria brought him the list of people who wanted to help. "I appreciate this, Maria, but I can't run a medical practice with volunteers. There are regulations, insurance issues, liability problems. What if we start small?" Maria suggested. "What if people just helped with the things that don't require medical training? Cleaning, translating, organizing, fixing broken things." Dr. Chen thought about it for a week. During that time, 3 more families came to the clinic in desperate situations similar to Maria's. A construction worker with a badly cut hand who had been afraid to go to the emergency room. A pregnant woman who needed prenatal care but had no insurance. An elderly man with diabetes who couldn't afford his medication. Dr. Chen treated them all, and his bank account got smaller with each patient. Finally, one evening when Maria found him working late again, he looked up at her and said, "Okay, let's try your idea." The first volunteer day was the following Saturday. Maria had spread the word through the neighborhood, not sure how many people would actually show up. At 8 a.m., there were 12 people standing outside the clinic. By 9 a.m., there were 20. Mrs. Rodriguez's husband, Diego, brought his tools and started fixing the ceiling leak. Anna set up a small desk in the corner where she could help translate for patients who didn't speak English. Patricia organized all the medical supplies and created a system to keep track of what was running low. Carlos, who had appointed himself as the clinic's unofficial greeter, showed new patients where to sit and brought them water while they waited. But the biggest surprise came when people started leaving small envelopes on Dr. Chen's desk. Inside each envelope was a small amount of money, sometimes $5, sometimes 10, sometimes just loose change. Never much, but it was what people could afford. "This is for the electricity bill," one note read. "Thank you for helping my daughter," said another dot. By the end of that first Saturday, the clinic looked completely different. The ceiling was fixed, the floor was spotless, medical supplies were organized, and there was a feeling of hope that hadn't been there before. Dr. Chen stood in the middle of it all, looking around in amazement. "I don't understand," he told Maria. "Why would all these people give their time to help a clinic that's not even theirs?" Maria smiled, watching Carlos teach another little boy how to stack the newly organized toys. "Because now it is theirs," she said simply. "You made it theirs when you decided to help people, instead of just making money. Now we all have a place where we belong." As the volunteers packed up their supplies and said their goodbyes, Dr. Chen realized that something had changed. The clinic wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to the community. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. 6 months after that first volunteer day, the clinic had become something nobody could have imagined. What started as a desperate mother's plea for help had grown into something that felt like magic happening in real time. Every afternoon at 3:30 p.m., Carlos would run through the clinic doors with his backpack bouncing on his shoulders, calling out, "Dr. Chen, Dr. Chen, I'm here." He had claimed a small corner near the reception desk as his homework spot, and patients had gotten used to seeing the 9-year-old boy working on math problems while they waited for their appointments. Carlos wasn't the only child who had made the clinic a second home. Maria's nephew, Roberto, who was 12, came by after school to help organize files and restock supplies. Little Sophia, whose grandmother was being treated for arthritis, would sit quietly drawing pictures that Dr. Chen hung up around the waiting room like they were masterpieces in a museum. The children brought life to the clinic in ways no adult could. They made elderly patients smile, helped translate when their parents were busy, and somehow made everyone feel like they were visiting family instead of going to the doctor. But it was Maria's younger sister, Alina, who brought the biggest change. Alina was 23 and in her final year of nursing school. She had been struggling to find a place to complete her required clinical hours because most hospitals wanted students who could pay for expensive programs. When Maria told her about the clinic, Alina was skeptical. "A free clinic in our neighborhood?" she had asked. "Are you sure this doctor is legitimate?" But after spending one afternoon volunteering at the clinic, Alina was convinced. She approached Dr. Chen about doing her clinical hours there, offering to work for free in exchange for the experience. "I can give shots, take blood pressure, help with basic procedures," she explained. "I need the practice, and you need the help." Dr. Chen hesitated at first. Having a nursing student meant more responsibility, more supervision, more things that could go wrong. But watching Alina interact with patients, seeing how gentle and careful she was, he realized she might be exactly what the clinic needed. Within weeks, Alina had become indispensable. She could communicate with Spanish-speaking patients in ways that made them feel comfortable and understood. She knew how to calm scared children and help elderly patients feel dignified during examinations. Most importantly, she freed up Dr. Chen's time so he could see more patients. The ripple effects were immediate. Word spread through the neighborhood that the clinic now had someone who could speak perfect Spanish and English. Families who had been afraid to seek medical help because of language barriers started showing up. Mrs. Gutierrez brought her teenage daughter, who had been having severe stomach pains for months. Through Elena's translation, they discovered the girl had been skipping meals at school because she was embarrassed about their homemade lunches. The stomach problems were from stress and hunger. Mr. Valdez, an elderly man who hadn't seen a doctor in 10 years, finally came in for a checkup after Elena spent 20 minutes on his front porch explaining that Dr. Chen wouldn't judge him for not having insurance. A young mother named Carmen brought her baby, who wasn't gaining weight properly. Elena helped her understand that the baby needed a different formula, and then organized a collection among the volunteers to buy it for her. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. Carlos had always been a bright kid, but spending his afternoons at the clinic, surrounded by medical equipment and conversations about helping people, had sparked something in him. He started asking Dr. Chen questions about everything. "Why does that machine beep?" He would ask about the heart monitor. "What's in that bottle?" He'd wonder about medications. "How do you know what's wrong with people just by listening to their chest?" Dr. Chen found himself looking forward to Carlos's questions. The boy was genuinely curious, and explaining things to him helped Dr. Chen remember why he had wanted to become a doctor in the first place. One day, Carlos surprised everyone by announcing, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor just like Dr. Chen, but I'm going to help kids, especially." The adults in the waiting room smiled, thinking it was cute, the way children sometimes announced their future careers. But Dr. Chen took Carlos seriously. "Being a doctor is very hard work," he told the boy. "You have to study for many years and learn about science and math and how the human body works." "I know," Carlos said confidently, "but I want to help people. Feel better like you helped me." From that day forward, Dr. Chen made a point of teaching Carlos small things about medicine. He showed him how to take blood pressure, explained what different instruments were for, and let him help organize medical supplies by learning to read labels and understand what each medication was used for. Maria watched this relationship develop with wonder. Her son, who had been dying in her arms just months earlier, was now learning about medicine from the doctor who had saved his life. Sometimes she had to pinch herself to believe it was real. The clinic had become more than a place where people came when they were sick. It had become a community center where neighbors looked out for each other. When Mr. Torres lost his job at the construction company, other patients helped him find work. When Mrs. Morales needed someone to watch her children while she worked double shifts, the other mothers organized a babysitting schedule. When the Garcia family's apartment flooded, people brought clothes, food, and offered places to sleep. Dr. Chen found himself in the middle of all this, not just as a doctor, but as someone the community trusted with their problems. People would stay after their medical appointments to ask his advice about their children's education, about job interviews, about family troubles. "I didn't go to school to be a counselor," he told Alina one evening as they cleaned up after a particularly busy day. "But you're good at it," Alina replied, filing the last patient chart. "People trust you. They feel safe talking to you." It was true. Dr. Chen had become more than a medical provider to these families. He had become someone they could depend on, someone who cared about their whole lives, not just their physical health. The changes weren't just happening to the patients and volunteers. Dr. Chen was changing too. 6 months ago, he had been a struggling doctor, working alone, worried about bills, wondering if he had made the right choice in opening a clinic in this neighborhood. Now he woke up every morning excited to see what the day would bring. Would Carlos have new questions about medicine? Would Alina teach him a new Spanish phrase? Would another family find the help they needed? The financial struggles hadn't completely disappeared, but they had become manageable. The small donations from patients, combined with the volunteer help, meant the clinic could survive. Not prosper, exactly, but survive and serve the people who needed it most. One evening, as Dr. Chen locked up the clinic, he looked around at the drawings on the walls, the organized supply closets, the clean waiting room with its mismatched but comfortable chairs. He thought about Maria's desperate offer that rainy night, and how refusing it had led to all of this. Sometimes the best things in life came not from taking what was offered, but from giving what was needed. And sometimes, when you gave freely, you received more than you could have imagined. 3 years had passed since that desperate night in the rain, and the small clinic had become something no one could have predicted. What had started as one doctor's struggle to help his community had grown into a beacon of hope that reached far beyond the neighborhood. Carlos, now 11 years old, was sitting at his usual homework spot when a woman with a camera walked through the clinic doors. She was followed by a man carrying recording equipment and another person with a notebook. Carlos looked up from his math problems, curious about these strangers who looked different from their regular patients. "Excuse me," the woman said to Alina, who was now working at the clinic full-time after graduating nursing school. "We're from Channel 7 News. We're here to interview Dr. Chen about the clinic." Alina smiled and pointed toward the examination room where Dr. Chen was finishing up with a patient. "He should be done in a few minutes. Would you like to wait?" As the news team set up their equipment, Carlos couldn't contain his excitement. "Are you going to put Dr. Chen on TV?" he asked the reporter. "We are," the woman replied. "We heard amazing stories about this place and wanted to share them with more people." Carlos beamed with pride. "Dr. Chen saved my life," he announced. "And now I'm going to be a doctor too, just like him." The reporter's eyes lit up with interest. This was exactly the kind of story that would touch people's hearts. When Dr. Chen emerged from the examination room, he looked surprised and a little uncomfortable to see the cameras. "I'm not sure what there is to film," he said quietly. "We just treat patients here, like any other clinic." But as the news team spent the day filming, they captured something extraordinary. They saw Carlos helping translate for a scared little girl getting her shots. They watched Elena teach a group of teenagers about diabetes prevention in both English and Spanish. They filmed Maria organizing a food drive for families who couldn't afford groceries while waiting for their appointments. They saw Mr. Rodriguez, the construction worker, fixing a broken window during his lunch break. They watched Mrs. Gutierrez teach other mothers how to make healthy meals on a tight budget in the clinic's waiting room. They filmed the wall covered with drawings from children, thank you notes from families, and certificates showing perfect attendance at school. What the news team discovered wasn't just a medical clinic. It was a community that had formed around the simple idea that people should help each other. The reporter interviewed several patients throughout the day. Mrs. Lopez, whose diabetes was now under control thanks to Elena's education programs, said, "This place saved my life. But more than that, it gave me a family." Young Roberto, Maria's nephew, who was now 15 and volunteering as a translator, told the camera, "I used to think doctors were only for rich people. Now I know that healing is for everyone." But it was Dr. Chen's interview that really captured the heart of what had happened. 3 years ago, a mother came to me in the middle of the night with a dying child, he said, sitting in his small office surrounded by the organized chaos of a busy clinic. "She offered me everything she had to save her son's life. When I refused, her offer entreated her child anyway. I thought I was just doing my job as a doctor." He paused, looking through the window at the waiting room where Carlos was helping an elderly man fill out forms. "What I didn't know was that saying no to her desperate offer would lead to something I never imagined. This isn't just my clinic anymore. It belongs to everyone who walks through these doors." The news story aired on a Tuesday evening. Dr. Chen, Maria, Elena, and Carlos gathered in the clinic's waiting room to watch it together on Elena's laptop. As they watched themselves on screen, seeing their daily routine through the eyes of strangers, they realized how special what they had built really was. But none of them were prepared for what happened next. The day after the story aired, the clinic's phone started ringing non-stop. People from across the city wanted to know how they could help. A wealthy businessman called to ask about donating money for new equipment. A group of retired nurses offered to volunteer their time. Medical supply companies reached out to offer discounted products. But the most surprising call came from a government official. "Dr. Chen," the voice on the phone said, "I'm calling from the Department of Health and Human Services. We've been looking for community health centers that serve immigrant populations effectively. We'd like to discuss making your clinic a federally qualified health center." Dr. Chen had to sit down. A federally qualified health center would mean steady government funding, the ability to hire more staff, and resources to expand their services. It would mean never again worrying about keeping the lights on or buying medicine for patients who couldn't afford it. "What would that mean for us?" he asked. "It would mean you could serve more patients, offer more services, and have the support you need to continue the amazing work you're already doing," the official explained. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The clinic had expanded into the building next door. There were now 3 full-time doctors, including a pediatrician who worked specifically with children like Carlos. Elena had been promoted to head nurse and was training other bilingual nurses to work with immigrant families. But the most important changes were the ones you couldn't see in the new equipment or expanded waiting room. Maria had earned her GED and was now studying to become a certified medical interpreter. Every morning, she still arrived early to help prepare the clinic for the day. But now she was paid for her work and was learning skills that would help her build a career. Carlos, true to his word from 3 years earlier, was excelling in school and had been accepted into a special program for students interested in medicine. He still did his homework in the clinic every afternoon, but now he also helped teach younger children about health and wellness. Alina had started a program too, train community health workers, teaching people from the neighborhood how to help their families and neighbors stay healthy. The program was so successful that other clinics across the city wanted to copy it. The clinic now offered services that went far beyond medical care. There were English classes for adults, job training programs, legal aid clinics, and support groups for everything from diabetes management to parenting skills. But perhaps the most meaningful addition was the wall in the main hallway, where they had hung a large photo from that first volunteer day 3 years ago. Under it was a simple plaque that read, "It takes a village to heal a village." On a quiet evening, after the last patient had gone home and the volunteers had finished cleaning up, Dr. Chen often found himself standing in front of that photo. He would think about that rainy night when Maria had offered him everything she had to save her son. Maria would sometimes join him there, and they would look at the picture together in comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about that night?" Maria asked him once. "Every day," Dr. Chen replied. "I think about how desperate you were, how willing you were to sacrifice everything for Carlos." Maria nodded. "I was ready to give up my dignity, my body, everything I had. And instead," Dr. Chen said, looking around at the bustling clinic, "you gave us all something much more valuable." "What's that?" Maria asked. "You gave us the chance to build something beautiful together. You showed us that when people help each other without expecting anything in return, miracles can happen." As they walked toward the exit together, turning off lights and locking doors, Maria thought about how different her life was now compared to that desperate night 3 years ago. She had a career, her son was healthy and dreaming of becoming a doctor, and she was part of a community that felt like family. "Dr. Chen," she said as they stepped outside into the cool evening air, "thank you for giving us a new life." Dr. Chen smiled and shook his head. "Maria, you gave me a new life too. All of us gave each other a new life. That's what real community looks like." And as they went their separate ways home, both of them knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, and new opportunities to help people. But they also knew they wouldn't face any of it alone. They had something that no amount of money could buy, a family they had chosen, built from kindness, sustained by hope, and strengthened by the simple belief that everyone deserves to be healed.